Welcome to Christ Church's Spiritual Leadership Podcast. I'm Charles Kyker, your host. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's a little uncomfortable, to be candid. In fact, it's most uncomfortable, not only in a family context, but also it's most uncomfortable in a biblical, spiritual context and in the context of the life of a church. We're going to talk about the rape of Tamar. And as we talk about the rape of Tamar, there's many characters here that we can't negate. I'm not going to read the entire passage from 2 Samuel 13, but I urge you to consider doing that before the day is through, because I think it will add depth to what I'm about to say, because I'm going to share four very important principles of leadership that you don't want to omit in your own life. So these are four essential principles of leadership. So now in the first verse, it says, "Now David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amnon, her half-brother." Now Amnon, of course, is the oldest son of David. I think it's important to lift that out. He's the one that's going to inherit things. And so her half-brother fell desperately in love with her. Amnon became so obsessed with Tamar that he became ill. She was a virgin, and Amnon thought he could never have her. But Amnon had a very crafty friend, his cousin Jonadab. He was the son of David's brother Shimea. One day, Jonadab said to Amnon, "What's the trouble? Why should the son of a king look so dejected morning after morning?" So Amnon told him, "I am in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." "Well," Jonadab said, "I will tell you what to do. Go back to bed and pretend that you're ill. When your father comes to see you, ask him to let Tamar come and prepare some food for you. Tell him you'll feel better if she prepares it as you watch and she feeds you with her own hands." So Amnon lay down. He pretended to be sick. When the king came to see him, Amnon asked, "Please let my sister Tamar come and cook my favorite dish, and as I watch, then I can eat it from her own hands." So David agreed and sent Tamar to Amnon's house to prepare some food for him. Tamar arrived at Amnon's house. She went to the place where he was lying down so she could watch her mix some dough. Then she baked his favorite dish for him. And when she set the serving tray before him, he refused to eat. "Everyone get out of here," Amnon told his servants, so they all left. Then he said to Tamar, "Now bring the food into my bedroom and feed it to me here." So Tamar took his favorite dish to him, but as she was feeding him, he grabbed her and demanded, "Come to bed with me, my darling sister." Verse 12, "No, my brother," she cried, "don't be foolish. Don't do this to me. Such wicked things aren't done in Israel. Where could I go in my shame? And you would be called one of the greatest fools in Israel. Please, just speak to the king about it, and he will let you marry me." And now verse 14, "But Amnon wouldn't listen to her, and since he was stronger than she was, he raped her. Then suddenly Amnon's love turned to hate, and he hated her even more than he had loved her. "Get out of here," he snarled at her. No, Tamar cried. "Sending me away now is worse than what you've already done to me." But Amnon wouldn't listen to her. He shouted for his servant and demanded, "Throw this woman out and lock the door behind her." So the servant put her out and locked the door behind her. She was wearing a long, beautiful robe, as was custom in those days for the king's virgin daughters. But now Tamar tore her robe and put ashes on her head, and then with her face in her hands, she went away crying. Her brother Absalom saw her and asked, "Is it true that Amnon has been with you?" "Well, my sister, keep quiet for now, since he's your brother. Don't you worry about it." So Tamar lived as a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard what had happened, he was angry. And though Absalom never spoke to Amnon about this, he hated Amnon deeply because of what he had done to his sister. In the remaining verses of 23 through 38, we find that Absalom waited 2 years. And after 2 years, Absalom then plotted the death of Amnon and had all of his brothers there at a festival where they were shearing sheep. And he had Amnon at his order. He had his own soldiers kill Amnon. Now let's go into the 4 principles, and there are many, many more that we could learn from this. But the first one is this. When there's a leadership gap, others will try to step in and fill it. When there's a leadership gap, others will try to step in and fill it. There's something innate about people. There's something innate when they see a leadership gap. When something's not functioning right, or something needs to be spoken, or something needs to be corrected, or something needs to be improved, there'll be a desire in the hearts of people to step up and fill that gap when they see it. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think there is within a team or within a group of people or within an organization, there are persons saying, this shouldn't be going in the direction it's going, or we need to improve what we're doing, or we need to make something better, or whatever. That's not necessarily bad, but it's just a reality that if there's a gap in leadership, people are going to feel like somebody needs to step in and somebody needs to fill it. That happens not only in an organization of 3 or 4 or 5 people, or a team of 20 or 50. It also happens in a local government, also happens in an organization. It also happens in a nation. And so somebody needs to step in and fill this gap of leadership. And so therefore, with all diligence, lead and lead well. If you have a Romans 12:8 leadership gift that God has given you, then lead and lead well. Because there's nothing on planet Earth that deserves to be led better than the local church, or nonprofit organizations that are making an impact in the lives of others. And if you're in business and you're producing a product or you're providing a service, do it and do it well, and lead well. Care for your people and lead well. And don't be offended or get defensive if there are things that are going on where people are shuffling to try to improve things. Learn from that, listen to that, and recognize maybe there is something that needs to be done differently. Absalom felt like his father was not leading well. David knew about the rape, but David did not go and confront Amnon. David did not call a family meeting. David did not say, we need to talk about this. And your sister is now in her brother's house with ashes on her head because of what you did to her. You should have ashes on your head. You should be the one who's excommunicated, not your sister. You took advantage of her. So David refused to lead. David did not step in and lead. David should have. So when people are not leading, there'll be others who feel like they need to step in and lead, i.e. Absalom felt like somebody eventually had to do something to right this wrong. Number 2, if you're not the designated person in leadership, then pursue all other avenues instead of assuming leadership on behalf of another. If you're not the designated person to lead, then don't step in and try to lead without pursuing all other avenues of leadership. Honor the person who's in leadership. That's Hebrews 13. Honor your leaders. And you honor your leaders by going to the leaders and say, hey, been observing some things and felt like it was in our best interest to talk about this. That's why I want to talk with you about it. I feel like something could could be done better. I feel like the product could be produced better. I feel like we could provide better service for our customers. I feel like we could be caring for first-time guests if you're in the local church better. I feel like we need to do better follow-up. I feel like for those who join the church, we need a more systematic approach in the first 6 to 9 months to care for them, make sure they're getting involved. I feel like with our student ministry, we need to make sure that we're texting them on a regular basis and getting in contact with them. I feel like in our children's ministry, we really need to be attentive to the fact that parents are carrying a heavy load now, and many of them are just trying to find their way, and we need to encourage the parents, or whatever it is, but go to the leader and talk to them. Don't just jump in and start leading without the spiritual anointing that you need. King Saul had already lost favor with God, but at the time he was still the designated leader. David would not circumvent that. David refused to step in and assume the kingship or to try to dethrone Saul. He waited upon the Lord. He waited upon God to make sure that this would be the case. He didn't try to usurp Saul's authority. Even when Saul was trying to kill him on 2 different occasions, David would not touch God's anointed. And on those occasions, David led well, and David led as a spiritual leader in the making by not trying to usurp the authority and the leadership of Saul. And at the proper time, he assumed the leadership when it was time for him to go. And so it's important for us to recognize that. Number 3, there's a huge difference between lust and love. You're going to do a lot of counseling over the years. You're going to do a lot of interaction with people who will come to you and say that they've met the love of their life. What they may be saying is, I've met the lust of my dreams, not necessarily the love of my life. When he got sick because he could not be with her, that wasn't love. That was infatuation. That was lust. And you could see it was lust because as soon as he had been with her sexually, the tables turned quickly. And then if you could listen, you could almost hear the echo from Paul's letter to the church at Corinth. Love is not rude. Love does not insist upon its own way. Love does not keep records of wrong. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. There was nothing loving in what Amnon did. It was self-centered, narcissistic lust, pure and simple. And so we need to be careful when we're counseling and working with people. We need to really help people help themselves when they're overcome with things that are not necessarily of God or of the Holy Spirit, but they are purely of the flesh. And that's very, very important. So many people can self-destruct at these moments because they're overwhelmed with the feelings of the flesh and not necessarily of the heart, and of course not of God. And lastly, coupled with this, Amnon had these feelings of lust, okay? And if there could be either a 5th point or if there could be a 3A, the 3A would be this: be careful who you listen to. Because he listened to his cousin, who probably had the morals of an alley cat. Why does the king look so dejected? What's wrong with you? You're the king's son. See, he was the heir. He was going to succeed David. So he wasn't just saying, as one of the king's sons, you shouldn't be so dejected. You should be happy because one day you will be in power. So if I were you and I had these feelings towards her, here's what I would do. So he plants the seed. Folks, let me say this. The enemy is consistently and constantly trying to plant seeds in your mind and in your heart. Trying to consistently plant seeds to deceive you, trying to consistently plant seeds that will throw you off path, that will, in the words of the Apostle Paul, make you feel better or more highly of yourself than what you should, and then also be highly judgmental towards other persons. Be careful who you listen to. Amnon listened to the wrong person. Here's what I know. When you go to a counselor or you go to a spiritual leader and they tell you something that you don't want to hear, keep going back to them. Come on, somebody. I'm telling you that counselor was full of crap. I'm telling you that counselor, she had it in on me. She didn't. Well, maybe she pegged you exactly where you were, but you just didn't want to hear it. You really need to consider who you surround yourself with and the voices you listen to. Because the enemy's consistently and constantly trying to plant seeds of deception in you, hoping and praying that they will grow into the very weeds that will choke your soul. Be very careful who you listen to. Be very careful who you surround yourself with. Are they persons who are walking with God? I don't mean the appearance of walking with God, but they're truly at peace. They're at peace with themselves. And there's fruit in their life. They're bearing fruit in their life for the kingdom. It may be small, it may be one-on-one kind of things, but that's still bearing fruit for the kingdom. They may only be reaching one or two at a time, but they're still bearing fruit. So they don't have to be a leader of hundreds or even thousands. But do they walk with God? Do they bear fruit in their life? Are they somebody that you need to listen to? Be careful who you listen to, because Amnon was listening to somebody to feed his lust. And often you and I surround ourselves with people who tell us what we want to hear, instead of challenging us to consider God's preferred present and future for us. And number 4, ask penetrating questions before empowering leaders to check their own emotional and spiritual health. Ask penetrating questions before empowering leaders to check with their own spiritual and emotional health. One of the most important things I do before I hire somebody in a major position of leadership is I ask them, tell me about your relationship with your father. Tell me about your relationship with your father, especially during your pubescent years. When you're 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, how was the relationship with your father? Andy Stanley said in a group of 20 pastors, and this is not something that I believe is confidential, because he even invited his father to come in a 2006 Drive conference that one of our worship pastors and I had the chance to attend years ago. Andy and his father had a major disagreement about something, and it actually became more public than private. And so Andy knew, because he got offers to go to Dallas, Texas and plant a church. He got offers to go to Fort Lauderdale. He got offers to go quite a few places before he planted North Point in Atlanta. But he decided to stay in Atlanta because he knew he needed to work on the relationship and he needed healing between he and his father. And Andy observed, by having some good Christian professors of counseling when he was in seminary, that often people carry hurts, they carry unresolved conflict, they carry situations the rest of their life until they resolve the differences they had with their father. Either hurt, disappointment, or absenteeism, or just having a fatherless situation, or whatever. The other important thing is to see if they're carrying any anger or hurt with them currently, or bitterness. Because what we see in Absalom was 2 years worth of anger that was never dealt with, that was never talked about, that was never addressed. And he felt, don't miss this, he felt he was right in doing what he did because the sin was so unjust and unfair to his sister. You see, when you feel right, you start to feel righteous. And when you feel righteous, even you feel like whatever you're going to do is right. But murder, premeditated murder, was not right. Premeditated conversations and resolving conflict was right. Premeditated going into the king's palace and saying, King, we got to talk, and I got Amnon here with me, and I dadgum hog-tied him, and I brought him in here with ropes, and I gagged his mouth so he couldn't talk, and now ungag him, boys. Take the ropes off. Now, sitting here before the king, we're going to have a conversation. And it's about how you raped my sister. And I'm not leaving here until we resolve this. Now, that would have been okay. But premeditated murder, of course, only furthered the division, only furthered the anger and the bitterness, only furthered the hurt. Crucial conversations need to be had. I have interviewed people before in the past, and through the Holy Spirit, I have had some people to say, you know what? I need to resolve that before I go any further. Very healthy persons have said that. And they did. And some of them are on staff today because they addressed the hurt. They addressed the anger. They addressed the disappointment. And we've got to have those kind of crucial conversations because our deepest hurt or betrayal, we often carry with us, and it will bleed into other relationships. The lack of trust will bleed. Here's what I know. If people have unresolved conflicts with their father and they have not addressed those, they will have trust issues with people in leadership positions. And I halfway can't blame them. Because if you've been betrayed or hurt deeply by a father, it's hard for you to have trust relationships with someone else because you've been betrayed or you've been hurt or you've been let down or whatever the case may be. And so therefore, those issues need to be dealt with. David was wise and David was anointed. Here's the other part of this, number 4. Yet his sexual sins from the past blinded him in his leadership within his own family. Healthy leaders lead healthy environments. Leaders who are hurt, angry, and unhealthy will create unhealthy environments. They won't address the unhealthy because they themselves have blind sides. And the truth of the matter is, we all have some blind sides. That's why it's important to have people around you who are committed to the goal and the mission of your organization succeeding and being healthy, and then having people who are willing to speak truth in love. You need to have people, and you need to have an environment that you set up where you say, hey, pushback is not only okay, pushback is absolutely necessary if this organization is going to be healthy, and if we're all going to be well, and if we're all going to do the best we can do for the kingdom or the best we can do for this organization. We not only welcome pushback, it is a requirement, it is necessary. Now, pushback for pushback's sake, so you can always appear to be the smartest person in the room and you got control issues, that's not necessarily healthy. And eventually you can call that out. But pushback for the sake of truly wanting the mission to move forward, wanting to have a healthy environment and wanting all of us to win and achieve our goals and achieve the mission, that is absolutely healthy and it's necessary. So a couple of things for us to ponder and think about as we all seek to be healthier and we all seek to deal with our blind sides. And as I've said before in other podcasts, we all have character flaws. We just simply don't want those to become character gaps. Over time, if we don't address them or if we don't name them, they can. And just be careful who you listen to. Thank you for joining us in this leadership podcast.